Welcome to a brand new episode of DC and RC. I'm Daniel Cormier. That's my man, Super Bowl champion Ryan Clark. And Ryan, listen, I told you about your mouth, man. They always say that back in Louisiana.
What you mean,
You watch what you say about people because maybe one day you're going to run into them. Well, guess what? You talk all that stuff about Julianna Peña. She joined you on the pivot. And guys, look at what she told this dude right off the top.
I mean, I honestly, I came here to confront you because I just find it absolutely ridiculous. Like, I'm like, wait a second, what does this guy know about the sport? He doesn't know anything about MMA. Whoa. And then he was so negative and was like absolutely sure of himself that I was gonna lose. And I'm like, man, screw that guy.
RC, I mean, dog, the chickens come to roost finally because you've been you've been reckless. You've been reckless for months.
DC, I wasn't reckless, right? And I explained to Julianna why I thought the way I thought. Like it wasn't in any way a slight about her. And then she's like, "Well, does this guy know about MMA and this and that?" And I get all that. Like I understand that those things are gonna come with it. But DC, nobody else picked her either. Like the only people were people that
wait.
You did not pick her, DC.
Dude,
you did not pick her.
Don't lie, Ryan.
DC,
because Ryan,
DC,
when Amanda
you said she had a chance.
Y'all played this whole thing. Y'all played a whole thing about me, Amanda this, Amanda that, because I said it was the toughest matchup for her. Ryan, why didn't you tell her that? Actually, I watched the interview. You could have been like, DC was one of the ones that picked you.
DC, because you didn't pick her. You never picked her. You said that she had a chance. You said she'd been fighting well.
Oh, because
you said
because I'm a commentator. I can't. That's why I forgot.
So now you're trying to lie and say you picked her when you didn't pick her. So now you can have a friend because everybody else that comes on the show loves RC because RC gives everybody their flowers. And even Julianna, like when she won, bro. Yeah, I was shocked. She was shocked. You was shocked. Everybody, like if it was one of those things where we were like, she's supposed to win, then it's not one of the greatest shocking defeats or upsets in the world. Listen, Amanda Nunes is the GOAT of women fighters. When you look at the list of people she has beaten, and not only just beaten, DC, dominated inside of the octagon, it wasn't even to me about Julianna Peña. This was my thought process, and I'm gonna say this, because I didn't really get to explain it to her, right? Karl Malone. In two of the last, and Karl Malone wins the MVP, so he's supposed to be the best player in basketball. And then but he playing Mike. Mike's the GOAT, right? Charles Barkley wins the MVP, and what Mike said, and I took that personally, right? And he goes out and does his thing. So sometimes it's not necessarily about who you are, it's about who the other person is. But the one thing I can say about Julianna, man, was, once we got past that and we started to talk a little bit about who she was and the way that she's became the champion, the adversity she's going through, the different things, it truly gave me a new respect for her. Honestly, you're the only UFC champion or true UFC fighter that I'm close to, that I get to know in a way outside of the fight game. And so it was cool to have an opportunity to sit down with her and truly talk about her journey. And I do think that's something we all have to do a better job of as this sport continues to become the global phenomenon that it is to make sure we get some of these fighters an opportunity to show the world that they are truly people, the same way football players always want the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. To be able to tell their stories. But honestly, it was a great interview, man. I think you guys do a fantastic job crushing it. And to see Julianna, hey, but here's the thing, right? And that was the beauty in it, right? Julianna was able to just address it right away. And that's the problem with people in the world today. Nobody wants to say nothing. But when you deal with fighters, they'll tell you. And you as an athlete yourself was like, hey, look, I'll tell you why it was like that. But it was great, man. I enjoyed it. And it tells me that whole little spiel you went on Amanda Nunes, that you still believe the Amanda Nunes stuff. So you're going to be looking forward to the Ultimate Fighter 30 that's about to come up with those two as the coaches and the
So you picking. So if you get to pick, you're telling me right now, if
I
you
can't pick,
because we don't know.
I can't pick. See, that's why I'm safe, right? I can't pick. I'm a politician. I'm Sweden. I'm like neutral. I'm neutral, so I'm good.
And it's Switzerland. It's Switzerland.
Sorry, I'm Switzerland. Yeah, I'm Switzerland. I'm neutral. I'm Switzerland. I'm neutral. I don't have to choose. But Ryan, we're talking about rematches. There was another rematch last weekend. Belal Muhammad fought Vicente Luque. Vicente Luque knocked him out the first time. It was a non-event.
Early in the fight.
1 minute. 1 minute into the fight, he knocks him out. Saturday, Belal Muhammad, in Belal Muhammad fashion, earns out a decision using his wrestling and honestly really improved striking to get a victory over a guy that just starched him in the first time. So when you leave that, and that's always a question I wonder from a person that I'm sitting in there. I like wrestling, right? But wrestling's not the most appealing thing to most people. Decisions aren't the most appealing thing to the target audience. But when you leave that fight on Saturday, do you feel more of an idea that Belal's a true contender? Or are you just like, well, he's good, but he's not. He doesn't jump off the page like Khamzat and Colby and all those other guys.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly what you feel. Now, the one thing you do feel about Belal Muhammad is that he's improved and that he's made adjustments. Because when you look at that fight compared to the first, you were right. He held his own in the striking enough to get those takedowns round by round. And even though there wasn't a ton of punishment, I would say, done in some of those takedowns, there was a lot of ground control, right? And he controlled that fight, whether it was on the feet or when it got down to the mat. And so that's one thing that we have to focus on. And he called out what he called Karen Colby Covington after the fight, and I think what we saw, at least to me, when we got to watch Khamzat Chimaev fight Gilbert Burns, is that there is a difference in the level of fighter. That when you do get into those top 3, those top 4 fighters, there is a difference in what we see there. And I don't know if the win over Vicente Luque puts Belal Muhammad in that conversation, at least right now, with those guys before Khamzat Chimaev would get to fight Colby. We wouldn't skip Belal over him for that fight. And I think more people would anticipate that fight than they would, Muhammad fighting him after one win. But it's good. I think it puts him in the conversation for another top 5 fight. And if he's able to win that, say he gets a Gilbert Burns because Gilbert loses and he wins this fight, that's a matchup.
Likely. That seems more likely than the Colby Covington thing, right? Because when Dana goes out and says Khamzat versus Colby may be next, that's probably the direction that we're going. Let's just be honest. You can call Colby Covington out. You can do, unless he would have went out there and knocked out Vicente Luque in the first round, we're probably still full steam ahead towards Colby and Khamzat. Now, when I go back to Saturday, I remember going into the fight not knowing who was going to win, because Luque has shown on so many occasions now, even when he lost a fight, he had a 5-fight streak, lost, then had a 4-fight streak. He's shown an ability to finish on the feet, finish on the ground, and just a confidence, man. His technical skills are second to none. But Belal Muhammad has this way about himself, making these guys, these pretty fighters, these fighters that seem to be the ones that you cannot take your eyes off of, look very normal. And that's what he did to Vicente. But he did it in a surprising fashion. Generally, he's a forward-facing guy. Pressure, walk you down, get you to the side of the octagon, take you down. This time it was lateral movement. It was opportune times to throw in strikes where he would land, get away. Land, get away. And Vicente would think, okay, we're striking. Here comes Belal's takedown. I thought it was a well-executed game plan. I thought that it was exactly what he needed in order to keep himself in the conversation, because now he's on like a 7-fight win streak. I mean, the dude is burning red hot. But I think when you beat Wonder Boy in the way that you did, nobody's ever done that to Wonder Boy. Take him down and hold him down. When you beat Vicente Luque in the way that you did, 49-46 across all scorecards.
Yeah.
Tremendous wins. But it's not that star-making win that you need to truly like elevate yourself. He'll get a big fight, but he won't get a Colby Covington. He won't get a Khamzat. I think he's going to end up getting a Gilbert Burns, which is as risky a fight as any fight in the division, especially when the guy is coming off of a loss against Khamzat Chimaev.
Yeah, I think that's the hard part about this division. And I truly believe, DC, and you think about the light heavyweight division that was dominated by you and John Jones for so long. When you have these kind of iconic champions or just these elite level champions like a Kamaru Usman, you tend to forget that they're championship level fighters 1 through 5. It's just that the dude at the top is so good and so dominant. And so now, if you think about the welterweight division, DC, how do you see some of these matchups in the division where you have, you still have Jorge Masvidal, you have Leon Edwards, Gilbert Burns, Khamzat Chimaev, Colby Covington, Neil Magny. Like, who are some of the guys or some of the fights that you'd want to see happen right now? Because it almost seems that after Kamaru Usman fights Leon Edwards, we have to be hoping for a Khamzat Chimaev win over Colby Covington, or we're seeing the same thing over and over again. I mean, you need to get your pen and paper out, bro, and let us know what's going down.
You want it? You must want it. If you're asking for matchmaking, you must want it. So I'm going Usman versus Edwards. Hey, okay. Thank goodness, right? Because poor Leon Edwards, man, dude done won 10 out of 11 fights, and he finally getting his title shot. I'm going Colby versus Khamzat. All right, you agree with that? I do. Burns versus Belal. Now I'm matching up. That's the whole top 5. But here's the thing, right? There's a guy that is on his way up. He just got into the top 15. I think he's one of the dark horses in the division. His name is Sean Brady, right? Philadelphia kid, insanely tough, very gifted. He's undefeated since he's gotten into the UFC. I think at some point, this kid, right, needs, and I'm not certain if he's matched up yet, but I'm giving Brady an opportunity inside of the top 10. I'm sure I'm missing people. I'm sure there's guys in there. Neil Magny.
Right. So DC, what do you think? So you think so now that Sean Brady, right, because he is the name that's moving in the rankings. I think he's in the top 10 now.
He is.
So would you think if he gets an opportunity maybe against a Vicente Luque who just lost?
Hey, bro, I put it, my brother. You try to take my job? I'm Sean Shelby. I got
holla at me, Dana.
Versus Edwards, because Shelby is the guy. So Shelby's the guy that matches welterweight, right? So I am the black Sean Shelby, right? I put it on the bottom of my page. The black Sean Shelby. The black Sean Shelby says Usman versus Edwards, Colby versus Khamzat. Oh my goodness. Burns versus Belal, Brady versus Luque, Magny versus Masvidal. Because guess what? Neil Magny deserves an opportunity. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say Wonderboy Thompson, who is somewhere in the top 10 because he always lives in the top 10, doesn't deserve a fight. But right now, the division is moving in a different direction. And honestly, for Masvidal, coming off of the loss to Colby, the 2 losses to Kamaru, it's time for him now to kind of pay it forward, right? Go and fight a guy in Neil Magny who's still hanging around 2 longtime veterans where it just makes sense. But that's what we got, champ. We got 5 fights within the top 10. Usman versus Edwards, Colby versus Khamzat, Burns versus Belal, Magny versus Masvidal, Sean Brady versus Vicente Luque, because I believe at this point, Sean Brady, the Philadelphia guy, the tough, hard-nosed kid, wrestler, grappler, striker, can do it all, deserves an opportunity to stand across from one of the absolute best welterweights in the world, and we can see how far he can move up this division.
No, I think you know how it goes, man. Exposure leads to expansion, and opportunities lead to championships. And if you don't get those things, you don't get the gold, you don't get the money. And so I believe that as you win, and to DC, we also have to think, and it's not like Gilbert Burns is going anywhere, or the Colby Covingtons are going anywhere, Kamaru Usman, the Leon Edwards, but we always have to start thinking about who's going to be the new blood, who becomes the next contenders, and a guy like Sean Brady can do that. I mean, but that's also if we're thinking about fairness, right? Like, favor ain't, my mama got a saying, my mama stay in church, bro. She one of them Southern Baptist black women, what I mean? And the one thing about her, she says, favor isn't fair. And when you think about a guy like Khamzat Chimaev, who got an opportunity against a Gilbert Burns to put himself in that position. Not everybody gets that. Like, it doesn't have to be fair. But what does have to be fair, DC, though, is the strikes in the octagon. And if we go back to this Saturday, and it's so crazy. I'm blessed. I can be honest. I'm blessed to be on a group chat with you and a lot of other people that just truly love the MMA and love MMA and love the UFC. And you said there's never been a strike you thrown that wasn't intentional. And not necessarily like intentionally to hurt or whatever it is, but if you're throwing a strike, you understood why you were throwing it, when you were throwing it, and where you were throwing it. Can you kind of explain to the people what you mean by that when it pertains to the legal strikes that we saw on Saturday?
You know what kind of sucks is Kyle Borralho was fighting a masterclass of a fight in his UFC debut, in a co-main event, nonetheless. The other kid that was beating Huggy Bear, was fighting in a beautiful fight. So I don't want to make it as if I am crapping on these young athletes. I'm not. They were fighting great fights, but what they did was illegal. Now, right, when I say everything I threw was with intent, right? Everything I did was with intent in in this regard. If I threw a jab, the intent was to figure out what I could do next to land to something more damaging. If I threw a right hand, the intent was to land it and try to hurt my opponent. If I shot for a takedown, the intention was to get that takedown. Everything I did was with intent. When you got a guy like Huggy Bear on the ground and you're dropping ground and pound and you elbow him behind the head, is because you are intentionally trying to find the shot that is going to end the fight for you, even if it's illegal, right? Even if it's an illegal shot and you don't mean for it to be illegal, your intention is still to end the night. So when it strays, you still intentionally threw an illegal strike. When Borralho has his opponent beating him up, it starts to look like he's going to finish the fight. When he jams that knee, he is throwing that knee with the intent to finish the fight, even if he did not understand the rule, even if he did not do it purposely. There was still intent. So there's a difference between purpose and intent. And I think that is where it's getting skewed. Look, if you salvage a no contest out of those situations, best case for the guy that is doing it. We do a lot of things in our life, Ryan, where we get into trouble. And if the worst case was to get your butt whipped by your mom, because when we grew up, you could still get whipped. You still could get whipped.
Heck yeah.
But if best case was to go in the corner and get on your knees or just to be punished, then you wanted to take the best case scenario. For them, that's a no contest, right? Getting whipped is the DQ. Getting the no contest for these guys should be getting sent to your room for the weekend. And I think that we're making mistakes in terms of how we are judging intent.
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing, though, is when we get to that moment, DC, the rules should be the rules, and I think sometimes we're trying to see, how does the guy feel? Let's force him back into the fight. But we also see the fighters, right, looking off to the side, trying to see, okay, guys, like what's our move here? Can I win this thing? Can I win this thing? Can I not? No. But what I'm saying is, DC, if we don't leave it up to interpretation, right? If it is, this happens, DQ, no contest, whatever it's going to be, and it's over, then it's done. And I think it takes out who's winning, who's dominating, and all of those things to that point. But the one thing that we have been through and that we've seen this before in a championship fight. And Aljamain Sterling went through it. So let's get Aljamain on the line for one round with him, and maybe he can give us a little more clarity on what happens when you get some of these illegal strikes.
All right, guys, now it's time to go one round with the champ, Aljamain Sterling. Now, listen, call him Aljo. Don't call him the champ, because it don't matter who you are. This dude gonna check you. And he checked me a couple weeks. I said, champ, can I get an interview? Dude kind of checked me a little bit. I was like, Ryan, I felt played. DC,
we could tell he was in great shape. He had been in the weight room, right? He had been conditioning for the fight against Petr, but he better recognize, DC, you a heavyweight. This weight class is for a reason.
You better recognize game out here, dog. But hey, RC, he was in great shape a couple weeks ago. He's in great shape right now. He's a little fluffier. And if you're paying that camera down a little bit, he just put a plate down. Big boy win 176 2 weeks after the fight. Aljo, you living good right now, huh, my man?
Oh, yeah, definitely, man. Much deserved and earned, I would say. I'm trying to get my way back under control. Right now, I'm the chunk master. I'm trying to get back to the funk master.
Hey, man, after you have a big win like that, and it truly goes in the fashion you planned it to, when you look back at the fight where you made it without a doubt that you are the champion, what do you think went right for you that night in the octagon?
If I'm being honest, as I've been saying for 13 months, all I had to do was make sure I ate the proper way the day of the fight. Because the last time, I don't know what I was thinking. I don't think I was thinking at all. I was just focused so much on the fight that I forgot that I need to eat because I had 10 hours before I fought. And it showed in my performance. And this time it showed, like, when I'm full belly Aljo, I'm a problem.
Aljo, so you and I spoke on Monday. I'm driving my kids to school. I get a text message from you. You're like, I told you. Like, I mean, really, you literally just sent me a text that said, I told you. I called you immediately. And we went through the fight a little bit. And you said after round 3, you were like, listen, man, all I got to do is not fumble this, right? All I got to do is not fumble. How are you so sure after those first 3 rounds? Because in round 2, you won. I thought you should have got a 10-8. Round 3, you won. But in round 1, it was so razor thin. How are you certain that you had done enough that if you lost round 4 and 5, you would still get the victory and retain your championship?
Well, after round 1, I don't think he landed anything of significance. I know they were trying to count the stats and they were trying to say that was a hard kick because I fell back into the cage. Well, I think that happens to anybody who's using a lot of footwork when someone tries to throw a hard kick and it didn't even hit me to the body. I checked it, and me checking it out of the way, trying to get out of the way from the brunt of that kick, pushed me back into the cage. So I'm like, none of those strikes really landed in my head. So the way I'm counting it is like, I'm actually landing the cleaner strikes that are actually sticking. And if you want to call it a light strike, you call it a light strike. But when we're both throwing less than 20 strikes and I have at least 7 or 8 more than he does, I think I easily win the round, especially when I crush his head with the elbow that stumbles him backward. That's a hard strike. That was the most significant strike of the fight. So in that round, so in my opinion, I thought I was up 3 rounds comfortably. And I even thought I had 2 10-8 rounds. I should have at least had 1 in that second round.
In the second round, I've said it. I said it. 10-8 second round for me.
They said there was no threat of a finish, but that's not how the scoring criteria goes. It's duration, damage, and fight ending or criteria or something like that. So
Who told you that though? That there was no threat of a finish? Like, who have you spoken to?
The fans and clearly the judges.
Oh, wow.
I mean, they all put 10-9. So I'm not, I'm glad they scored it the right way, that the right guy won, but they need to go back and look at that and try to figure out why is it that they gave this a 10-9, the same way they scored the first round, the 4th and the 5th, when that round was completely dominated by myself with big ground and pound strikes. So if people want to say I hugged them.
That is where I thought the score was jacked, because there were times where you were on top of them just landing damaging elbows.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm not a judge, but I'm going by the scoring criteria. So in my head, I easily skated away with that fight, and I kind of gave away the rounds 4 and 5. Someone was trying to tell me that Jan made adjustments. I'm like, dude, he didn't make any adjustments. I hung out and gave him those positions because in my head, the same thing I thought in the first fight. If I could win the first 3 rounds, I can stall the last 10 minutes and win the fight. It was kind of like what I did with this one. I'm like, man, I'm comfortably winning. I don't need to do too much. Just don't get knocked out, which I'm like, there's no way I'm going to do that when I'm using footwork. But yeah, so, so obviously the fight, anything can happen, but in my head, I was comfortably up.
So how has the perception of your championship changed since winning this fight? We all knew all the stuff people threw at you after the last fight. Obviously, it was an illegal knee. No way that you could continue fighting and not be compromised. But you go out and you prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that you were more prepared, that you were ready to go, and that you are the best in your division. How has the perception of you as a champion changed since you dominated in the fashion that you did?
It's night and day. And I think the main thing that people are starting to pay attention to is, like, everyone was saying Jan by murder, Jan by whatever he wants. They're like, oh, Sterling, he looks like he's in great shape. Oh yeah, by the way, Jan by murder. I'm like, okay, you guys are funny. You guys really think I have no chance in this fight. But now you're starting to see these guys kind of grasping at straws, trying to make anything stick to say he won the fight. I'm like, all right, But for the most part, the perception definitely changed, and people gave me a lot more respect just for winning the belt that way as opposed to the other way. I mean, no one wants to win the belt like that. And the fans antagonizing me is literally the reason why I went that route, and cause and effect. So people were saying I was starting to act. I'm like, show me at what point of that after that knee I started to act. Like, watch the tape and show me at what point you could go right here. Right here, he was acting. He was clearly acting. Show me that, please. Because everybody else that gets hit with illegal strikes, apparently these guys are all professional fighters, but it is what it is. I got the last laugh, and I got to prove that. Like I said, this entire time, I knew who I was going into that fight, and I know who I am still. And I showed everybody that it's still and still.
But listen, they can all judge, but you're the only one sitting atop the world right now. Now, Aljo, here's a thing that's changing in mixed martial arts, right? Guys are showing up to the arena fresh as can be. And look, I'm not one to dress, but my boy Ryan Clark is clean. And we about to start this little segment on the show called Step and Fly with Ryan Clark. And that jacket, Aljo, I mean, that pink jacket, come on, man.
Yeah, listen, man, I was like, I got to come in looking like a champ and show everybody that I'm feeling good, and this is what confidence looks like. I remember when we were picking out the fabrics, I was like, nah, this is going to have everybody geeking if I come out with this, and then, of course, get the win. It's like, that's a double whammy right there. Like, that just shows, like, I'm not coming here to take part, man. I'm coming here to show out and collect everything, man. That's really it.
Check my boy Clark style, though. My boy Clark wore a jacket a little bit ago. It was like, wow, but so you're telling me that your body got to look like you and Ryan to dress like that, Aljo? Are y'all body shaming the big boy out here?
You got enough money where you can pay for all that fabric, bro. You good, dog.
That's it.
You just got to pay for the fabric. But Aljo, now you can't walk into the arena like that and then take a L. So you came in the arena, like you said, you didn't come to take part. You came to take over, which you did. The outfit to the fight, but it was also after the fight. When you got the microphone, you did what you have to do. And it's about calling out the people you want to fight. So now it's TJ Dillashaw. He's standing outside the ring. He's out there with the tattooed hands. He's saying the B word and he ready to go. How do you feel about that fight? And is that something you really want against a former champion like him?
Oh, 100%. I feel good about the fight. I do think if it was a three-headed horse, between him, Jose Aldo, and Henry Cejudo, I think TJ's probably the fight that I would be more enticed by in the sense of what he has accomplished in the bantamweight division. So for me, I think that's the fight that I want. People want to see that fight. I mean, his performances haven't looked too great as of late. So I kind of want to ask him, what's it like to, be on the sauce and coming off of it, So I mean,
you're so open about him being. You're so open about him, and you just don't believe that TJ was clean
ever. I mean, I think before his John Dodson fight, I think he was kind of regular, and then after that, he kind of turned a corner like really, really quick. And I don't know, man. Like his teammates outed him when he fought Cody Garbrandt, and he said, you showed the team how to do it. And the media brushed it under the rug. And it's there for anyone that wants to go listen to it. So then you're trying to tell me this is the only time he's ever done it? Your teammates just threw you under the bus, bro. So you can't tell me anything that guy has competed clean. Like his entire legacy to me is tainted. But I'll gladly step up in there with him, like I have done probably with countless other people. And just still see who the better man is, because I think that's a mentally weak person, and I want to go out there and show what hard work can really do.
Hey, champ, before we let you go, and first off, where we from, those are fighting words. Those are called fighting words.
No question.
Right now.
No
you might as
question.
well put that thing on his shoulder and slapped it off talking about his mama. But those are fighting words, dog. Those are fighting words, but ultimately you guys will get to fight. But I got a question for you. People judge you so harshly about the illegal knee. Last weekend, Aljo, we went through some stuff with the illegal strikes that went to the scorecards. Like, give me some thoughts on this, man, because I said to myself, both should have been disqualified. I said it on the broadcast, but then you get this vitriol from the fans like, DC, what about when you poke Stipe in the eye? Well, everybody poked me in the eye. It happens. But what do you think about that? Like, did I can't remember the guy's name, the referee, did he make a mistake by not disqualifying? or Mergliata. Did he make, was it him in both fights? It was him in both fights too. Was it a mistake to not disqualify? Or do you think you go to the judges' scorecards? Because it would seem as though you and I are fighting, or you and Piotr fighting. You up 3-0, you punch him square in the balls. I mean, you punch him square between the legs, and you go to the judges' scorecards, you win without running the risk of getting knocked out.
Yes, which is why the system is so flawed. And John McCarthy and all the other guys that are the blueprint standard, whatever, the rules are flawed, man. If you are winning the fight and you can just get away with that, then why even have the rest of the rounds? If the guy threw the strike intentionally to your head when you are down, he intentionally meant to knee you in the head.
Which one do you think was worse, the elbow or the knee?
The elbow's a little bit of a gray area because it's obviously the head, and the little mohawk thing is so hard to define because they're like, if any piece of the glove touches the ear, then or any part of the fist touches the ear. Now, if you have big hands, you could touch the ear and crush me in the back of the head at the same time. So the rules are kind of like that one in particular for me is a little bit difficult, but the one when the guy has a hand down and you launch the knee directly at his head intentionally.
Yeah.
How is that a discrepancy? There is no way you can say that's an inadvertent, unintentional foul. That is a illegal blow intentionally thrown. That is a disqualification at worst or at best, a no contest.
No contest. Yep.
You can't discredit that and try to say, well, you guys fought this much of the fight. Like, dude, come on, man. What are we doing? We're going to enforce the rules or not? I think the commissions, they need to take a look at the rule book and really make these adjustments. Like, I'm not trying to be the hero and die on this hill, but guys, there are rules for a reason. And if guys are going to be able to bend the rules to get wins and collect W's, that changes someone's career, them potentially getting cut. There's a lot that goes into this, especially financially, right? So what are we talking here? We got to do the right thing.
Yeah, and unfortunately, and the reason I wanted to ask you was because you went through the same type of situation. You won the belt on the disqualification, whereas these kids, and look, we're not trying to crap on these two kids because they both were fighting beautifully. They won those fights and deserved the credit that they got for winning, but still illegal, and you should pay for it. Champ, thank you for taking a few moments out of your day, man. Get back.
BC better stop calling that man that.
One thing, that one guy, he had his hand down. He got kneed in the face. He took it like a G. The ref came over and said something, and all of a sudden that my man started rolling on me.
You said, Aljo.
Aljo. It's a late reaction.
DC, can you go? I don't know. Disqualification, or are we going to the judges? Like, come on, man. Like, what is happening? Hey, champ. Oh, man, I called it to him again, Ryan. This boy going to get me.
He gonna get on you, though. We gonna jump him. No trip. The old people, we gonna jump him.
Yeah, we're gonna have to jump this boy. Thank you for joining us, Aljo. You the man.
I appreciate you, man.
Thanks, fellas.
RC, you told me I better stop calling that man champ. That's kind of
you see it.
That's a little bit of that's like a weird deal, right? Like, don't call me the champion. Maybe last year I get it because of the way that he won the belt, but maybe now he's more open to it. But as always, Aljo's a fun interview. And Aljo got a problem. He ain't afraid to tell you about it. Like, Aljo will tell you about his problem.
I love that, though. I love that. That's the same thing we talked about with Julianna early on in the show, man. Yep. Fighters fight, though, DC. Like, I used to try to tell people all the time. Like, it was truly something that I had to learn in the real world, right? Because I own a gym. And probably like my first 3 years there, because I'm working on the floor, I was about to fight like 3 or 4 times. And, and it was like adult people. Like, it wasn't like little people or like teenagers, but it was just one of those things to where we'd be talking trash, and I tell people all the time, the best trash talkers have facts on their side. And as I'm talking trash to somebody who I've accomplished more than, obviously I'm gonna be able to hurt your feelings, and I'm good at it, right? Like, I can talk.
When
right.
And so then is over.
Right. And so then they kind of like buck up, and I'm like, oh, like we could just fight then. But I had to, right. But you have to realize though, DC, that locker room, gym mentality that we grow up with, that we understand, that's not even aggressive. It doesn't work in real life. And so that's, you got to shut it off. You got to shut it off. But I'm telling you, like, I think it's one of those things. We're talking about shutting it off, right? Shutting off the competitiveness, shutting off what some would call violence, shutting off the stupidity or the bravery that makes you guys great fighters or makes us great football players. John Jones hasn't been the guy that shut it off. John Jones hasn't been the guy that's been disciplined about understanding here is what fighters do and here is what men do away from the octagon. But Dana White is eyeing a return for John Jones. And I think it's a return or at least a fight or a matchup that Matchmaker DC has always had in mind for an interim title, which would be against former champ and someone you had a great trilogy with, Stipe Miocic. What do you feel about Dana saying this is a fight that he wants to make?
I think this is the fight. I mean, I think that based on credentials, based on accomplishments, this is the fight to make. And honestly, for a time, it didn't look like Stipe playing that same game where he was going to wait was going to pay off. But now it seems like it's going to pay off. It seems like it's going to work out to where he's going to end up fighting for some part of the heavyweight championship of the world. And I believe that that is exactly the way it should be. When you got a guy in Jones, who's one of the most credentialed fighters we have ever seen inside the octagon, I understand all the stuff that happens outside. But when it comes time to fighting inside the octagon and you can almost isolate him from himself, you put him in there with Miocic, the greatest heavyweight of all time, on International Fight Week, which are absolute bangers every single time. You remember last summer, Poirier versus McGregor 3.
Yeah.
It's a great weekend that needs to be headlined by a great fight. And I believe that this is an evenly matched fight because I've been in there with both of the guys, right? Jones has different weapons than Miocic, but Miocic has some crazy weapons himself. For a big guy, he does a lot of things really, really well. And what I believe that is interesting in the matchup also is that Jones will be the 205-pounder coming up. Stipe is the lifetime heavyweight. Jones will be bigger because if you look at Jones now,
he is big,
his social media, he's a big boy. And Miocic has been slim for a while. So a lot of different storylines playing into this one because the Stipe put on weight, the Stipe stay small, this Jones gets smaller as he approaches the fight. Like, it would be a fantastic fight on a fantastic weekend, and you and I can watch it from the stands together.
Man, you know what I do love about what this will be is that it's not let's warm John Jones up. I think it's the UFC understanding that his appeal only gets smaller if we try to build John Jones into a heavyweight. Started right away with a huge fight.
I think it's too risky. I honestly think it's too risky to let him fight anybody else at heavyweight because
I agree.
What if he loses? Which is a very high possibility.
Yeah, and I think that's where we are too, is that we're trying to get back to the heavyweight champion truly being the baddest man in the world. And when you have a guy like John Jones and a former champ like Stipe Miocic, who is, the greatest heavyweight champ of all time based on what he's done in the octagon, I think that's something that people are going to want to see. International Fight Week's going to be crazy. Me and you going to be out there all week. Hopefully, Glenn, let us do the show in Vegas.
Man, on, Glenn, man,
and have a good time. But that's not the only heavyweight bout that's coming up in combat sports, because we have Tyson Fury and Dillian Whyte who are going to fight at Wembley Stadium. Now, this is the first time Tyson Fury has been back there and fought on his home turf since 2018. It's also one of those crazy things of, do we care as much about this fight as we have the Deontay Wilder Tyson Fury trilogy? I think sometimes when you come off of something that's so big with a personality that's so huge, the next thing is like a letdown, because for so long, he was the only guy we felt was in the same tier as the Tyson Fury. And now we move on to this fight. How do you feel about Tyson Fury getting an opportunity to defend his championship belt on his home turf?
Ryan, you are so right about the next thing when something's so big. So I think what they're doing in this one is they're going to rely on the environment, right? 90,000 expected, back home for the first time, like you said earlier. The environment can uplift just about anything. You put a fight in front of 100,000, 90,000 people, it's going to seem bigger and more massive than anything you've ever seen. Now, Dillian Whyte's a talented fighter, but when you talk about Tyson Fury and his evolution from being a great fighter to having the abuse issues and everything that derailed him for a while, to working his way back to being the heavyweight champion of the world. I remember going into the Klitschko fight. You thought that he was just another guy, cannon fodder for Klitschko to beat and continue to defend his championship. All of a sudden, Tyson Fury wins, and he wins impressively. And then you look at this guy like, wow, after all that, Tyson Fury is back. Tyson Fury at one point weighed 400 pounds. Now Tyson Fury makes the weight, and he fights, and he knocks people out. We watched Tyson Fury rise from the dead, like the Undertaker, son.
Undertaker, bro. He popped up out there too. Like,
no one's ever seen no stuff like that in Los Angeles. We watched him rise from the dead, son, like the Undertaker. But if you have dealt with the demons that he has had to go through over the course of his life and his career, nothing can deter you. And to see him go back home, 90,000 in Wembley Stadium, it is going to be absolutely electric. So yes, it'll be hard to live up to the fights, right? That moment in fight 1, the way Tyson just rolled through Deontay in fight 2, to the evenly matched fight 3. It'll be difficult to find another heavyweight to match him on that level. So you rely on the stories and the environment surrounding the fight to elevate it. And I think they got that right.
Yeah, and I think you have to maneuver in a way, and I think this is where the UFC has not only caught boxing, but actually moved beyond them in getting some of these elite fighters opportunities to fight in front of their home crowd. Or even as we're watching, think about Tom Aspinall and Paddy Pimblett, having an opportunity as they are growing to fight in front of their home crowd. We saw the same thing with the Conor McGregor. We got to see it with, Israel Adesanya and Robert Whittaker. Like, those things are huge. And this is smart for boxing to kind of move toward that as well.
Well, because you know why, RC, like a Tom Aspinall, right? We put Tom Aspinall in Wichita, Kansas. People will say, oh, it's Tom Aspinall, pretty cool. But the visual of the way they treat him at home is like nothing else. Him and Paddy Pimblett are absolute stars there. Molly McCann, who has been up and down in her career, is a star there. So then you could take them and it puts them into the next thing that's even bigger. And that's why you put people fighting in front of their home crowds, because it really does build the resume. Now, we talk about what's next. Another guy that fought last weekend, Errol Spence. You guys sat down with him, talked to him during your fight week on the Pivot. But Errol Spence is a fantastic fighter. Errol Spence went through some truly horrific stuff in his personal life with the accident. But Errol Spence goes out last week and does what Errol Spence does, and then says the words that everybody's been waiting to hear. Bud, let's go. And then Bud says something, and Errol says, say less. And now it seems like we get Errol Spence versus Terence Crawford. How excited are you to see these two young fighters, great fighters, finally seemingly on a collision course with each other?
DC, you said it in the second part of your description. Young fighters. Remember the days, man, of, and I was young, right? And so my dad's always hipping me to these things, or getting to watch the replays, the Hagler Hearns, the Sugar Ray Leonards, the Roberto Durans. This was when we had all of these fighters in or around the same weight class that didn't dodge each other in their prime. And it gave you what, the 3 or 4 rounds of Hagler Hearns where everybody forgot that they even trained for the fight, and it was about technique and skill, and we just tried to kill each other, or it got us no mas, and so you get all of these things. But then when we had Manny Pacquiao, Floyd Mayweather, it seemed like we missed that opportunity.
It was years late.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes this better. And we went through the whole interview on the Pivot, and obviously at the end I say, okay, and I didn't even make it a big deal. I said, what about Bud? Are we going to get to see it? And he said, I have 2 belts. Beating your Dennis Ugas is going to give me the 3rd, and then there's only 1 more. And I think for Errol Spence, though, and DC, you can get into this a little further because you understand it more. I think for Errol Spence, he also knew this is going to be the toughest belt to get. That if you try to get this belt early and truly unifying the weight class is what you want to do, you may not be able to do it that route. And so now you build this fight up as big as you possibly can. It's for all the marbles. It's for every belt. And truly, it gives you an opportunity with this being the last belt that if this is a close fight and it goes either way, we see it again.
Yep.
And people anticipate seeing it again. But when you look at the matchup of these two great young champions, how will you see this one playing out, DC?
You know, that's a crazy fight. And, you know, when you said in their prime, see, it was our boy Floyd Mayweather. We all love Floyd, but Floyd had a way of finding guys at the right time. Manny, a couple years too late. Canelo, a couple years too early. He was the smartest businessman with the greatest, because he knew exactly what to do and when to fight guys. But these two in their prime, ready to go. But here's my thought. You don't have an accident like Errol had, and it's free. You don't have to go through something like that, as horrific as that was, the injuries that he had to deal with, and it not at some point rear its ugly head. I think that happens in a fight with a guy of the caliber of Terence Crawford, because it's not free. You don't get to, it's just like every fight you're in, when you go to war with somebody, it's not free. You are taking damage to the chin. The body suffers. And I think that Errol Spence is still a world champion, high-level fighter. But I think that in those moments with a guy like Terence Crawford, when he has to really get into the gritty, I think he'll be getting hit in places that he isn't normally dig so deep that it'll be the injuries may start to show themselves a little bit from all that he's gone through. I just don't think it's free. I don't think any damage to your body's free, man. And when you are driving your car and the whole top's off and it's flipped upside down and you're airlifted to the hospital, at some point, man, you got to pay for that. And I think that in a fight like that, and Bud's also grown into the weight class. Bud is now a true 147 pound. He's not small anymore. He's big, he's strong, he's physical. And Terence Crawford is nasty. Dude's nasty.
Yeah.
Great fight. I would kind of lean towards Terence Crawford today. Ask me that before the accident, I may have picked Errol Spence because he was bigger and his skill level. But today, I think Terence Crawford. But RC, you know what time it is.
You know what time it is, Coach. I only have my watch on. We're going to tap in, tap out.
Hit your boy line, Errol. Hit your boy. Hit your boy line, RC. Corporate Jake.
All right,
Corporate
guys.
Jake, let's get it.
All right, guys. Last week, Nick Diaz's coach teased the fact that Nick could return before the end of 2022. As for his brother Nate, he continues to go back and forth on Twitter with Dustin Poirier. So, DC, tap in or tap out that we see Nick Diaz in the octagon again before his brother Nate?
No. I tap out. It's me, Nathan. Nathan. Remember, he said he wanted to only be called Nathan. The dude will text you. Dude will text you and be like, yo, what's up with this guy? Ryan Clark, he be all over you, Ryan. What's up with Ryan Clark, man? Nathan, it'll be Nathan.
He gonna if at me.
It'll be Nathan. It'll be Nathan first, because my last visual of Nick Diaz, I don't feel like we're going to really see him again in the octagon, because the pictures, he looked shredded. Inside the octagon, he looked like a different man, and it didn't seem like he wanted to be in there. So I think we'll see Nathan first.
Yeah, for me, I tap out on seeing Nick before Nathan. And I also think that the draw that Nathan Diaz is still matters. And I do believe, too, that is kind of why we play double dutch with his next bout. I think it has to be, you know, the contract situation has to be dealt with. And I think you want the right space for Nathan Diaz, because we know that he's one of the few people in the sport that when he shows up to the arena, the pay-per-view views are high, and also the ticket sales are high. So he doesn't necessarily have to be on a card where a belt is up for grabs, and he could still headline that with a 5-round fight. And so to me, I think that we see Nathan Diaz first. What's up next?
Stipe and I were in the second fight. Diaz was the co-main event. And I'm telling you, you see his bump in the pay-per-view sales right away. So I believe we see him first. But what about Dustin? Him and Dustin keep going back and forth. And Dustin seemed upset the other day, saying everybody's fake. I don't know who he was talking about. I can't tell if he was talking about Nate. I don't know what was going on, but to see those two fight would be fun. And it would be interesting. But I don't know if that's what the UFC has in plan for him or Nathan Diaz. Corporate Jake.
Hey guys, UFC 275 is headlined by 2 title fights in Singapore. However, the fight most people could be talking about come June is the rumored rematch between Zhang Weili and Joanna Jędrzejczyk. The first time these two fought was an instant classic. So RC, tap in or tap out. The timing is right for the Weili Joanna rematch.
Bro, I tap all the way in. And honestly, I think as long as we get this while they both can still flat out go, it's the right time. I would have taken it a year ago. I would have taken it an immediate rematch. This was truly an opportunity in their first fight to watch two of the best mixed martial artists go toe-to-toe and have zero back down. It was one of those fights for me that when I think back on just being a fan and just getting an opportunity to marvel at humans do things, one, I'm not capable of, and two, I'm not willing to freaking do, to watch two people do that, man, and to do it at the level in which both of these women did, man, was truly amazing. And I can tell you, I don't care who else is on that card, it's going to be hard to look forward to a fight more than that one.
I tap in because I remember the story, I remember the visual, and I'm happy about it now, RC, because as you know, you and I as athletes, one of our greatest assets and our skills is the ability to forget, right? Somebody go past you on a pass and they score a touchdown, you got to forget that and get to the next thing. You get knocked out, you go back in there with a guy again, you got to forget about what happened prior. You hope that enough time has passed now for these two women to have forgotten a little bit of what went into that first fight. Because if they fought right behind each other, they went right into a rematch, they would have been like a little bit cautious. It would have been hard to live up to the fight that we saw before. Whereas now some time has passed. Joanna's been doing her own thing. Zhang Weili has fought Rose twice. It's like time has passed now. So that ability that fighters have to forget what the first interaction gives it a chance. But unfortunately, most rematches, just like Jurassic Park 2. Remember how good Jurassic Park was? And then you watch Jurassic Park 2 and 3. It's like most rematches just don't live up. And I don't know if it could live up to it, but I think that time in between will allow for it to be a little better. Corporate Jake.
So Jake Paul is making the rounds again, calling out retired fighters, and this time he has taken aim at former middleweight champion and UFC Hall of Famer Michael Bisping. Bisping has responded with send the contract. DC, tap in or tap out on Paul turning his attention to Michael Bisping?
Okay, so here we go. I'm tapping in to Michael Bisping doing the fight with Jake Paul because I know Michael Bisping believes he can beat Jake Paul. So I guess I'm tapping in. I have some, like, I just think that for Jake Paul, if he wants to be really considered a fighter, just like Mike said, if you want to fight a 43-year-old man with no eye and no knees, then okay, send the contract. It's almost an acknowledgement of the type of athlete that Jake Paul is wanting to fight. And I think that if he wants to truly be taken seriously, he's going to have to do something different. We don't have much time, so it's hard for me to really get into my entire thoughts on this. But I'm tapping in because I know Mike can make a ton of money. I know Mike feels he can beat him, but there are so many other reasons why I think Jake Paul should be targeting other people.
I tap out because I believe in consistency. And what we've seen consistently from Jake Paul is him picking fighters who, one, don't box, and two, aren't in a place in their life or career that matches up with where Jake Paul is. And with Jake now. And so when I say I tap out on it is, okay, like this is not boxing to me, right? This is not a man trying to build a boxing career. This is not like the young boxers who are coming off of the amateur circuit and are now, starting their fighting career in 6-round fights. And so to me, the reasons DC would want to see it, because Mike thinks he can win. Bisping also can make a lot of money. Like I want to see that because I just like the dude. You know what I mean? But on the other side of this being a building block for Jake Paul's career, that's a negative. And so for me, I tap out on it.
All right, guys, last one. With Easter being this past Sunday, Angela Hill took to Instagram to show off her Easter egg art. Last year, she recreated the infamous DC Rogan panic reaction and followed it up this year with
Ladies and
Darren Till and Hamzat sitting on top of the cage. So RC, tap in or tap out. Hamzat makes for better egg art than DC.
I tap in. It surely makes for better egg art because DC head was turned this way, his hand was over his head.
It was
like this. It was a very tough moment to egg recreate. You know what I mean? Hamzat and Darren Till, they're just sitting on the fence and they're just chilling. I think that was an easier one to recreate than DC. Also, wouldn't she have to get, one of those extra large eggs that you got to get from like Whole Foods or something to be retired DC?
First off, I don't want no big eggs. Like, dude, look, I'm tapping out. The art of me and my boys were better. But RC, first off, like with eggs, chicken, I don't want no big eggs. I don't want no huge chicken breasts. I don't want my food looking all abnormal. Like, do you eat those big old chicken breasts and thighs?
No, I don't.
It's disgusting. No chicken is that big.
No.
Guys,
that's like eating a baby ostrich.
Huh? That's an ostrich.
That's like eating a baby ostrich.
Dude, stop buying those big chicken breasts, man. Stop buying big chicken thighs. Chickens are not that big. Buy the smallest pack that you can get. I'm not doing none of that, and so I'm not eating no big egg. Like, what kind of dinosaur egg is that in the egg carton? But tap out, man. Forget that. Tap out. My egg art was better. And you remember that was when Zhang Wei Li got kicked in the face by Rose Namajunas. Remember that?
Yes, it was.
That's why it was a crazy moment. Is why we were going so nuts, man. It was a lot. It was a lot. RC, look, man. Again, another great show. Always
man,
fun.
So much fun, bro.
Aljamain Sterling brought the heat as he always does. We get to talk fights, and we're getting close, dog. We're getting close to the reunion. Let me tell you.
I can't wait.
We're gonna be down in Arizona. We're gonna be down in Arizona at UFC 274. Dog, it's about to be great.
Man, I can't wait to see you, bro. Listen, this was a great show. Every single week, man, we get more comfortable, but more importantly, we have more fun. I hope all the fans, I hope everybody subscribing, following, is enjoying what we're doing it because we enjoy the hell out of it. Man, y'all have a good week. I'm Ryan Clark. That's my boy DC. What you got?
Hey, did you see me last week reading the promo for our show?
I did. It was excellent.
It was excellent.
It was excellent. That's a promo, dog.
Let's go, man.
We see y'all next week.